Welcome to this presentation. My name is Guillermo Vasquez. I am a freshman admissions counselor for UC Santa Barbara. And essentially through this position, my job is to make sure that students like yourselves and your parents, of course, are more informed about everything about the UC system, the UC application, and of course, UC Santa Barbara. So through today's presentation, I do want to essentially let you know that we're going to cover a lot of different material. We're going to essentially cover the UC system a little bit, an introduction there, a little bit about our campus throughout, as well as information about the UC application specifically and how to navigate it as best as you can. So this can definitely benefit anybody who is participating here today. As mentioned, I want you to ask as many questions as you can, or as many come up. Feel free to throw them in the Q&A box for them to be answered. Keep in mind that sometimes the questions that you might have will be answered throughout the presentation, so keep an ear out for any things that I might be mentioning, but sometimes you'll find that those questions will already be answered via there. Either way, ask questions in the Q&A box. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and get started here. So I want to start with just a little quick overview on our agenda. Like I mentioned, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview on the UC system. We're going to go over some updates as well, as there have been a lot of changes in the UC system throughout this year that we do want to make sure you're in the know of. Of course, you also want to make sure that we're covering the personal insight questions specifically, and as well for any of you seniors that you have some recommendations and things to keep in mind that are going to help you as you get through this these next couple of months. So to get started with the UC system and a little bit of an overview, it's important to know that, of course, in the UC system, there are 9 UC campuses that are spread throughout California. As you can see here on this map of California, some of them are closer to the coast, like us at UCSB, where we're literally located on the beach. And some of them are in the Central Valley, like Merced, or closer into the central area of California. One other thing that is very interesting and very different about our campuses is how they are sized and how they range in sizes. For example, UCSB is about a mid-sized UC campus with about 26,000 students total. And some UC campuses have double that size. Some UC campuses have half that size, and sometimes even less than half our size. So, it's something to be mindful of when you're looking and considering different UC campuses. Other things that make us unique are our majors as well. Majors can vary from campus to campus, and you'll find that some majors are at all campuses, like biology and undeclared. And there are, of course, some majors that are unique and individual to certain campuses. Like, for example, at UCSB, we're the only UC campus that offers zoology as a major on our campus. So different university campuses within our UC system will offer different things. So it's always very good to be in the know of what those are so that you can explore the different options that are out there. We do want to give you a little bit of an overview with some updates here. So first and foremost, of course, with pass, no pass grades and credit, no credit grades, we want to make sure that students understand that we are going to be understanding when it comes to these grades, and that you know that these are perfectly acceptable for the winter, spring, and summer of 2020 at this time. And of course, that we have temporarily suspended the requirement for letter grades for A through G courses. Essentially, if a student receives a pass or a credit grade, they can still consider those A through G courses completed. Keep in mind that pass, no pass, or credit, no credit grades, however, are not going to be calculated in the UC GPA. We will continue to only use either letter grades or your typical grading scale as part of the calculation. And also keep in mind that GPA will be calculated from 10th and 11th grade where the letter grade does exist. So with regards to AP exams, this is a little bit of a reassurance for students who did take these exams online this year, that if you received a passing score of a 3, 4, or 5, you're still going to get the same college credit you would have any other year. So there's no worry there that we would have depreciated your credit just because it was online. In the same vein, we also want to go over SAT and ACT as well, as there have been a lot of changes with regards to these two exams and the UC system. First and foremost, when it comes to the UC system, the UC system has gone test optional for fall 2021 and fall 2022, meaning essentially that students are not required any longer to take these exams as part of the UC application process. Students who want to report these will still be able to, and campuses may be able to use them as part of the admissions process, but students who don't report them will not be penalized in the application process if you don't report them. So you essentially have the option for yourself to essentially either take them or not take them, or report them or not report them. However, we do want to let you know that UCSB itself will not be using the SAT or ACT at all when it comes to the fall 2021 selection process, meaning that our campus, even if students report them on the application, we will not be looking at them when it comes to making an admissions decision. If you're curious about if any other UC campuses are doing this, please feel free to reach out to all the individual UC campuses that you are specifically interested in applying to find out directly from them, as I am unable to speak on their behalf. And of course, for any folks who are younger in the crowd, so any either freshmen or sophomores, know that we will be tested blind completely across the UC system for the fall 2023 and 2024 admission cycles, which means at that point, you will not be needing to take them at all, because we will essentially not look at them, these types of scores for SAT and ACT at all at that point. So with that information in mind, we do want to start on our UC application journey here as we begin to explore the UC system. So when it comes to the UC application, one of the most important things to note, of course, is that for the UC application process, you only need to fill out one UC application for the entire 9 UC campuses, which means that no matter how many you want to apply to, you can essentially, essentially only need to apply and fill out one application. Keep in mind, of course, that there are no interviews or early decisions or early actions when it comes to the admissions decisions or a process. So in that sense, you don't have to worry about any of those. You essentially can turn in your UC application whenever you can, and you don't have to worry about interviews. The only exception here, of course, is when we invite you to essentially send us things. So like it says here, letters of recommendation, portfolios, and auditions are not required at all and are not a part of the application process. You don't have to send these to us at all. We actually encourage students to not send us these because essentially we can't use them. The only exceptions are, of course, if we ask you for these directly. For example, with our dance and music majors at UCSB, we will ask you to set up an audition with us. Other than that, we don't need you to do any of that stuff at all. So something to keep in mind. Of course, when it comes to the UC application system, we use almost everything in the application essentially that we ask you about. Essentially, the reason for this is that we need to understand your context and the world that you come from so that we can best be able to understand you. And remember that non-academics as well as academics are just as important on the application. The things you're doing outside of the classroom are just as important in that sense. And of course, when it comes to the application process here, this is essentially the things that we cannot use when it comes to the application process on the right-hand side. So some of the, as I mentioned earlier, here are the things that we do use, almost everything. We use context clues, and we use academic and non-academic achievements as part of this process. But with the things that we can't use, you can see them here on the right-hand side. So keep in mind that things like race, ethnicity, religion, legacy, as well as the entire scholarship section of the application, which we'll go over in several slides from now, are not used as part of our process to make an admissions decision. So keep that in mind as we're going through the application process. Now, when it comes to navigating the UC application process, this is essentially what it looks like when you begin the application here. One of the things to note is that at the top of the screen, students can see a menu bar with the following selections like application status, my account, sign out, and help. With the application status section, this essentially shows you all open or submitted applications for applicants. After you submit your applications, essentially applicants can access and edit certain information from this page, which allows you to, again, add more information. For example, if you're applying to an additional campus that you didn't select prior. Also, in the My Account section, this is where applicants can view and or edit their email address and password that is associated with their account. Now, when it comes to your email address for this section, you want to make sure that you understand that your email address that you're telling us or that you're using to create your UC application is your login for the UC application. So this means that you should not be sharing email addresses with other people. And of course, that you use an email address that you're going to be able to access after you graduate. So for example, using your school email address can sometimes not work because once you graduate from high school, sometimes that will be completely shut off. And we don't want you to get shut out from your communication with us because we're going to still send you information there in the summer. Of course, through the help section, this shows answers to frequently asked questions depending on what section of the application you're on. And clicking on the help will also display the contact information for our UC Application Center, which can be a very big help if you ever get stuck on the application process. Keep in mind that when you're going through the application, there is a 20-minute timer, which means that after no activity for 20 minutes, the UC application will automatically log you out. However, your information will be saved, but we want you to be aware of this in case this does frighten you, since it is something that can happen. Of course, When you complete a section, you will see a blue button which reads Save and Continue. And every time you click this button, it's essentially going to restart the UC application timer so that you have more and more time. Of course, when you're going through the application, we encourage you to follow the right-hand side navigation in the order that it's presented. So as you can see here, it goes from About You, followed by Personal Information, etc., etc. The reason for this is that details shared in one section may share opportunities in the following section. So for example, your family income that you share in the About You section can then share, if you qualify it, for a fee waiver in the campuses and majors section. So you want to make sure you're answering them in the order that they're there on the application. So as you can see here on the right hand side of that image, though, this is essentially the list of the different sections that you're going to need to go through as you complete your UC application. So you want to be mindful of that, and again, follow that as it is. So the first section of the application, of course, is the About You section, as you can see here on the left hand side. For this section, think of it as the section where this is essentially you presenting us with your biography. It's an opportunity for you to share your background information with us so that we can get a better understanding of who you are, where you're coming from, etc., etc. This is there is information asked of you here that you might not think to bring up in other parts of the application. So it's always important that you make sure that you're telling us everything that you can here as well. That's going to provide us more context. So as I mentioned earlier, the UC system does provide application fee waivers to eligible students. And to apply, simply applicants must enter a family income and family size, where family size is the number of individuals supported by that income amount that you're entering in the application. Keep in mind that this could include grandparents or any other family members living in the same household or also being supported by that income. So you also want to make sure that you're accurately counting that number for yourself. Now, as you answer the questions in this section, you want to make sure that you're answering the questions to the best of your ability. Keep in mind that for the About You section, there's no right or wrong answers, and then we understand if you don't have an answer for some of the questions, which is perfectly fine. We do, however, want to make sure that you're keeping a couple of things in mind. So, for example, when it comes to the citizenship information section, AB 540 eligible students or undocumented students essentially need to mark no selection from the drop-down menu. Also, when you're asked about a social security number, students who have a social security number can enter their number there, as well as if a student has a DACA SSN, you can also add that information there. Or if you have a ITIN number, you can also add that information there as well. So depending on which ones you have, you can definitely add that information. However, if you don't have any one of those three, either an SSN, a DACA SSN, or a ITIN number, you essentially want to leave that question blank. When it comes to the demographics question, this now asks for students' ethnicity and their gender, and students can select female, male, or non-binary as gender selection. And when it comes to the parent information section, there's going to be you're going to essentially be allowed to add up to 4 different options. So if you had an extra guardian or step parent that you'd like to add, you can definitely add them there as well. And one of the cool new things about the About You section is that you're now able to also include your preferred name as well, if your preferred name is not the same as your legal name as well. So as we move along the application after the About You section, you move into the campuses and majors section of the application. For this section, remember that you can choose as many or as few UC campuses that you would like, and you are not ranking them in any way. So the way that you click them or which order you click them does not affect anything whatsoever. And also remember, applicants who have entered their family size and income in the About You section will see if they've qualified for a fee waiver on this page. If you qualify, essentially, you're going to essentially get a fee waiver for up to four UC campuses. So you want to make sure that you're using all 4 because, again, they're free fee waivers. Now, as we move into the campuses and specifically the majors section of the application here, students can pick an alternate major for almost all UC campuses. So keep that in mind, except for UC Berkeley. And majors are automatically, when you get to this section, listed by college. But you can also view by category at each UC if you prefer. However, I have to say, if you're looking for majors at UCSB, viewing by college at UCSB is the easiest thing that you can do, since we do have some majors that are listed twice, but in separate colleges. Like we have biology in both the College of Letters and Science and the College of Creative Studies. So it makes it easier to figure out which one you're looking for if you're viewing it by college at UCSB. With the categories option, this allows you to see all of the majors listed by category. So sometimes, like I mentioned, this can list more than one or a major more than one time. So it's important that you keep that and understand that as you're going through the application process. Keep in mind that undeclared is an option at all 9 campuses, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. But at UCSB, undeclared is listed under special programs if you are looking via the categories option. But if you're looking via the colleges option, undeclared will be within our College of Letters and Science. I do want you to keep in mind, though, however, that at some campuses offer their undeclared option is offered by subject. So, for example, some schools might have an undeclared engineering or an undeclared social sciences program where essentially you're going to need to figure out which one is the right one for you. So you want to make sure you're checking in with those UC campuses to figure out which undeclared option is the best one for you. So when it comes to this section of the application, when you're selecting majors, if you are looking to apply to UC San Diego, I do want to let you know that aside from just picking majors for yourself, UC San Diego is also going to require you to rank their colleges as well as the majors that you're picking. So if you do have questions about that ranking system or how it works, please contact them directly. I don't know how it works directly, so make sure that you're reaching out to their offices of admission because they're going to essentially be able to tell you how the college system works and maybe give you some background information on each of the colleges so that you're picking the right one for you. So after the application, or after the major section of the application, we are hitting the academic history section of the application, where you're essentially telling us all your grades and the class that you took. For this section, you must self-report all of your A through G coursework completed and or planned for your high school, as well as any college or dual enrollment classes that you have planned. And you also want to make sure that you're including all of the high schools that you've attended in chronological order. So if you have attended more than one, keep that in mind. We also want you to remember that we only take self-reported coursework with the UC application, so you don't need to send us any transcripts as you're applying. We will take your word for it when we're evaluating your application. And then once you are admitted and you decide to come to our school, that is when we will essentially ask for your transcripts to verify. So as you go through this section, you will notice that there is a 7th and 8th grade section for this part of the application. And for this section, if you took any math or language other than English or any foreign language courses, these can definitely be listed here and can fulfill your A through G requirements. Keep in mind that we won't ask you to provide any transcripts for these courses later on. So just keep that in mind that you don't have to go and ask your middle school for a transcript. When you're entering your grades, please enter grades earned as they appear on your transcripts. If you are owed any bumps for any AP, IB, transferable college courses, make sure that you're not adding the bumps yourself. So for a class essentially it's an AP class and you got a B, listed as a B, we will essentially give you the bump ourselves later on. So keep that in mind as you go through that section. When you're going through this section of the application, also keep in mind that you can also enter any summer coursework. So keep that in mind, enter all of that summer coursework as well. And of course, students should not report coursework done at a college or university level during the summer in the coursework section. There will be the specific colleges attended in high school, as well as the college courses taken in high school section to report any of those college grades separately. Of course, for summer courses, if a student earned a semester of a course credit during the summer, they can essentially list that course under grade 1. For grade 2, you can essentially mark no for no grade earned. So essentially, once you get to that section, you'll have that option of only listed 1 grade if that is all you receive. So when it comes to the academic history section and the colleges or dual enrollment portion of the application, please don't forget to let us know if you are planning on any college courses during your senior year. Because of course, when you're going through the UC application, you're not necessarily, you're not necessarily done with all of the classes that you're taking. So if you are planning any dual enrollment courses for the future, feel free to let us know right away through that portion of the application. Now, when it comes to the pass, no pass, and credit, no credit, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have suspended the letter grade requirement for A through G courses taken during the winter, spring, and summer 2020, which this means that you will be able to include any pass, no pass, or credit, no credit courses taken during this time, as you can see here. And of course, this can be a mix of pass, no pass, and letter grades as well. So if during the spring this last school year, you essentially took some classes for a letter grade and some for a pass, no pass, you'll still be able to list those accurately depending on what those were. Now, when it comes to the test scores section of the application, this is pretty much what it looks like here. For this section, there are several exams that you can report, as you can see here on the right-hand side, going from SAT and ACT all the way down to international exams. Keep in mind, again, that all SAT and ACT exams, if you are planning on taking these, again, because they are test optional, so essentially you don't have to take it if you do not like would not like to. But if you do want to take these, keep in mind that you should be taking them by December of your senior year. Essentially, if you don't take them by December or try to take them after December of your senior year, we're not going to get scores on time to be able to evaluate your application with those scores in mind. And of course, keep in mind that if you send official SAT or ACT scores to one UC campus, all of the rest of the UC campuses get it as well. And again, remember, all of these exams are optional, including the SAT and ACT, as I mentioned. So keep that in mind. SAT, ACT is optional, so are the subject exams, so is IP, IAB, etc. They're not required by any means. For this section, however, you do want to report all exam scores that you do have earned, or that you have earned, because of course, even though they're optional, we would like to see them on your UC application. It definitely can demonstrate your motivation to challenge yourself academically and go above and beyond the minimum requirements that you have. And again, although it's optional, you want to make sure that you're reporting that again. Also, if you're planning on taking any AP or IB exams during your time, during your senior year, also make sure that you're letting us know that, because that's going to help us in understanding what you're planning on taking as well. So moving into the academic activities and awards section of the application, moving outside of the academic and into the non-academic. For this section, keep in mind that, again, the UC campuses take into account your academics and your non-academic factors. Both are very much equal in our eyes. Again, applicants must be strong inside and outside of the classroom in that sense. So be sure to report all of your extracurricular activities, involvements, or awards earned in this activities and awards section. Keep in mind that there is, for this section, no limit to the categories that you can essentially select and how many you can put in by category. As for this section, for every activity you add, there will be essentially a category that you'll need to put it under. So there's no limit there. And of course, there's no right or wrong category when it comes to you categorizing your activities. Just make sure that you're reporting all of your involvements that you got, that you essentially did here. So keep that in mind. When you're getting to this section of the application, however, make sure that you're not repeating entries though. Even if they do fit into more than one category, use the extra space that you have to add something new or different about yourself. So, for example, if you had an activity that fits in both, say, extracurricular work or extracurricular activity or educational preparation program, you don't have to list it twice. You can just put it in there once and put it under the one that you feel it fits within the best. For this section, keep in mind that activities can literally mean a variety of things. It can mean sports, music, leadership organizations, jobs, internships, volunteering, helping with your family, taking care of siblings, family members, etc. If you have any responsibilities at home, that all counts as an activity. So we want to hear about everything that you do within all of those things on this part of the application. And of course, keep in mind that we're generally looking for 3 things within the different things that you're telling us about and how you're describing this. We want to see commitment, how long you've been doing that activity or how long it's been something that you've been able to be part of. Also keep in mind that we're also looking at progression, how you've been able to grow, be able to expand within that field. And also be able to keep in mind that we're looking for leadership as well. We're looking for students to be able to be strong in leadership skills. We don't necessarily need students to have titles when it comes to their different, to the different leadership opportunities that they're telling us about. We're just looking for you to tell us about leadership skills or leadership opportunities that you have had where you've been able to be a leader, not necessarily have the title of a leader. So for this section, we do want to let you know that you want to focus on high school specifically. So as you can see here, you essentially get to select from 9th to 12th. So, but we do want to essentially give you the caveat that if you have been doing something since before high school, you do want to let us know that. So if it's something like I've been playing piano since I was 4 years old and I'm still doing it in high school, definitely tell us about that. If you're somebody, however, who did something, if you were a part of like a soccer team in middle school for like a year, in that case, if it's not something that you're still doing, we prefer that you don't report it because we want you to stay within things that you're still doing or activities that are still relevant to you in high school in that sense. For this section as well, make sure that you're not forgetting about your spring semester, especially for you seniors. Remember, you can definitely tell us what you are planning to do as well, not just what you're already doing or what you're currently doing as well. Also, keep in mind that we completely understand that you may not have the exact number of hours per week for this section of the application or even weeks per year. We just ask you to give us your best average when it comes to those involvement hours for your different activities, because that will give us a better idea of how long you were able to spend within that activity. When it comes to further information for this section, keep in mind that you're going to have a small box to be able to add a quick line or two about the activity or award that you are essentially a part of. For this section, you want to describe your leadership role or responsibilities for each of the involvements that you are a part of. And if it's an activity or organization that is specific to your high school, you want to make sure that you're telling us what the club's mission or goal is. You know, for example, was it meant for volunteering or tutoring, etc. And of course, there's no need to describe any more universally known organizations, like if you're a part of the Red Cross, or if you played basketball and it's just simply basketball, you don't have to explain basketball to us, right? Of course, if you do have acronyms within those organizations or clubs or involvements, make sure that you spell out the acronym. It doesn't matter what kind of acronym it is, or if it's one that is well known, make sure you spell it out. You know, there's never enough information that we can have, so make sure that you're spelling out your acronyms. Of course, you also want to make sure that you're focusing on your involvement on the in this activity and how the activity was unique to you. We don't need you to actually give us a full description of volleyball or something like that, but rather we'd rather that you focus on what your role was on the team and what your experience was and what you were able to get out of it. And of course, if you've been involved in an activity prior to ninth grade, like I mentioned before, tell us about it. If you were been doing the same sport, activity, music, playing the same instrument, etc., for several years, definitely tell us. That's going to be able to give us more information and more value as to what the things that you were been able to do. So keep that in mind. Of course, when it comes to the activities and awards section, we do want to put in the information with regards to COVID and how to be able to navigate this section as best as you can, given that a lot of us have been locked into our homes through stay-at-home orders. And I do want you to know essentially that we in the UC system are very understanding that these are very difficult times that we're living in, and we want to remind students that, of course, we're only going to evaluate them within their own context. So you're not going to be penalized for what you don't have available to you. We don't expect every student or any student really to be really involved during stay-at-home orders, but if you were able to get involved in some capacity, we do want you to explain that and be able to tell us what that looked like for you specifically. But in general, keep in mind, we're not going to penalize students for not doing things during stay-at-home orders. I myself was under stay-at-home orders like everybody else was in the state of California and in this country. So, if I wasn't able to do certain things, I could certainly understand that other students weren't able to do their activities in clubs as well. Moving into the scholarships section of the application. For this section of the application, students should essentially select any and all scholarship categories that apply to them. Keep in mind that for this section, depending on which UC campuses you selected, that is going to change what scholarship opportunities are presented to you through this section, because of course every campus will have different opportunities. But again, select all of the ones that apply to you. There is no limit whatsoever. So for this section, apply to all of them again that are going to be applicable to you. Now, getting into the real meat of it, the personal insight questions. So for this section of the application, you're going to have 8 different questions to choose from, and you're going to need to answer only 4 of them. Pick your top 4, and options are given to you in this session, section to make it easier for you to relate to the different questions. So there's no point in asking us what we prefer, because this pretty much defeats the purpose of making it easier for you. Again, and also as you can see here, there is no preference between the questions. They all have equal value as well. So, of course, you want to make sure that you're picking the 4 that make sense to you. And keep in mind that you're not going to be able to answer more than 4 questions on this section. So in that sense, again, make sure that you're picking the 4 that are right for you. So when it comes to this selection of the questions, all of the questions are available online. All you have to do is type in Google UC PIQ, and it will show up for you. And also, Keep in mind that you're also going to get the descriptions of what we're looking for those questions as well. So there's a lot of help for that online as well. Of course, we're going to go over the different questions in a couple of slides, but keep that in mind. They're always available to you no matter how, what grade you're in or where you find yourself in high school. For this section, keep in mind that there is a 350 word maximum for every response. So very short in that sense. We want you to really treat this as an interview and a job, not an essay. For this section, you want to make sure that you're being very selfish and using a lot of I and my statements when it comes to this section of the application, especially because, of course, we want to know about you, not other people. The more we know about you specifically, the more that we're able to learn about the person that we're reading about. And again, we don't know who you are unless you tell us who you are. So you really want to make sure that you're focusing on presenting information about yourself using a lot of I's and my statements or I's and me statements. So one thing to really focus on again is that, this is essentially a personal interview on paper, like I mentioned before. As that, with that in mind, you don't have to focus on grammar or spelling or style or anything like that. At the same time, however, you do want to make sure that you're also making sure that you're not shortening words like in the activity section where you can shorten things for us. For this section, you want to make sure that you're still keeping things professional as you're writing through them. So keep that in mind. So for this section, we do have some different things to be able to help you as you go through this writing process. First and foremost, you want to make sure that you're keeping everything as clear as possible. Ask yourself, what does the admissions counselor want to read and know about myself? And then give us as clear of an understanding of who it is that we're reading about without actually knowing you. Keep in mind, again, these questions are going to ask you questions that are going to allow you to be able to tell us about yourself. So make sure that you're giving as much of clear information about you as possible so that we can get as clear of a picture of who you are as possible. Context also very much matters. Again, we mentioned this throughout the presentation. Context of every person matters. So you want to give us your perspective of what your life looks like. What is around you? What do you have available to you, or what don't you have available to you? And tell us what you've gone through within your life. This is going to be able to give us more of a perspective on who you are, where you come from, and what your life looks like. Within depth, you want to make sure that you're getting into more detail about an activity or an event, especially if it's something that you've already mentioned in the activity section, but you want to give us more detail. This is definitely the section to do so that we can get a more full picture of that specific activity or event that happened in your life and what its meaning was for you. And just overall, keep in mind that we do want you to give us the best possible picture of what you're explaining. The more that we can visualize you, the better that we can understand who might be coming to our campus. So again, think of this as a job interview and what you would like to share with the interviewer so that you can essentially sell yourself as best as possible and they can get to know who you really are. So with that in mind, we do want to go over at least a couple of these questions. You can see the first 4 questions listed here. However, I'm only going to highlight or go over a couple of them here per group of 4. So for this instance, I do want to touch upon number 2 because this is a really good question. So for example, so for this question, it is every person has a creative side and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. So for this section, make sure that you are not writing a poem or trying to show us how creative you are by writing us a story or writing us a song. Rather, you want to focus on the fact that you're telling us what creativity you have and how you've been able to use it. What have you done with it? So first and foremost, explain what are the ways that you express your creative side. What have you done with that artistic side? Did you do a showcase with your art? Did you volunteer to paint something? Did you volunteer to create and support a musical or a play, or did you participate in a play or musical? And also, did you do something to support others with your skill? For example, if you create, if you created a piece of art that was showcased at a museum, maybe you sold the painting, or if you play an instrument which allows you to show your artistic side and perform live in front of a group of people. These can all be ways and things that you can tell us directly about your artistic side. But again, remember, we're not looking for you to show us your artistic side. We want you to tell us all about it and how you use it. We also want to highlight for this section the 4th question here, and this is describe how you have taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or how you work to overcome an educational barrier that you have faced. So for this question, you really want to keep in mind first and foremost, one thing, if you're looking to answer the first half of this question, and that is, have you done anything outside of your traditional class time or class work that you are required of? First and foremost, so that you can narrow things down for yourself. You know, for example, did you take any honors, AP, college courses? And if you did, why did you take them? How did that experience help you grow? You know, or did you grow? And on top of that, you know, did that prepare you for college, or do you feel that it prepared you for college? And is it something that you're passionate about, or are you potentially going to pursue that in a career? These are things that we do want to know. If you're looking to answer the second half of this question, you do want to make sure that you tell us about how you overcame that barrier and what you were able to learn from that experience, and specifically making it clear what that barrier was for you. For example, one of the examples that you can use to answer this is if you were able to go on a trip to another country for a class and learn about other cultures and politics, or if you went to an academic competition to compete at the state level, etc. So it's just the things that you're doing at an academic level outside of what is required, or if you're somebody who has had to face an educational barrier, that you're making that very clear to us and that you're explaining how that has affected you directly. Now for this section, we want to go over the latter half of the 8 different questions. For this one, I'll start by highlighting number 5, which is describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? So for this section, the first question to ask yourself is, what did you learn to overcome this challenge? What did you have to do to overcome that challenge that you're telling us about? And of course, what happened? How did you overcome it? Did this impact your academic or family life, or just your life in general, or your life or your family in general? And also, you know, did you handle this by yourself or as a group? It's very important for us to see that, how you've been able to handle these things, whether by yourself or with the help of others, which both are very admirable. Of course, you are, you also want to make sure that you're making us understand if this is something that you're currently working on, or if it's something that's in the past, and how you were able to overcome it. So making that clear gives us a better perspective and, again, context as to what you're going through. For example, some of the things that you could potentially talk about in this section is if, you know, the fires that happened in California, for example, you know, medical condition that you might have, or a family-related event, or if you have an academic challenge such as dyslexia, or if you took a really difficult course, or a course in general and got an F and had to redo it and you received an A the second time around. This could all be very meaningful for this section. The last one that I'll highlight here is number 7, and this is, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? For this question, you want to understand the community can mean a lot of different things for each person. So first and foremost, you want to define, what does community mean to you? And what have you done with that community? You know, did you help to improve it? And how did you make it better or improve it if you did? Also, what did you learn from that experience? Did you accomplish this goal by yourself or with others? Again, it's very important for us to understand those differences so we can understand the context of what you're doing. And again, keep in mind that for this section, this is definitely beyond just volunteering. And of course, if it is volunteer, you want to make sure that you're telling us more than just, that I volunteered and that's it. You want to tell us exactly what you've done to be able to improve your community. Also, for example, for the section, you can talk about if you created a new student organization to work with a specific type of identity student or provide academic support, or if you created something in your community that became a tradition. These are all very much things that you can talk about through this question here. So when it comes to this part of the application, how you pick your topics and how the process that you take with that is very important. First and foremost, you want to make sure that as you're going through this process of the application, or this part of the application, you're being as selfish as you can. Remember, we want you to tell us who you are, and we want to know about who is applying and who is possibly coming to our campus. Also, you want to make sure that you're being as honest and authentic as you can through this process of the application, because of course that's going to give us the most information about you, but at the same time, keep in mind, we do have a random verification process as well. We want to hear about what makes you unique. Otherwise other people, everyone would pretty much be the same through this application process. So we want to essentially hear what your ideas are, what your experiences are, and how that makes you different, especially because we want new ideas coming into our campuses. Also, keep in mind that lying won't help you at all in this section. We will never take points away for the things that you write on the application. So it's best to just tell us all of the things that are specific to you and what are honestly your experiences. Keep in mind that we don't want you to essentially write the name or write a specific campus anywhere on the application. The only exception is If you've participated in a specific program like a summer camp within the UC system or other universities, then we definitely want to hear about it. But if you're telling us, I am so happy and I really want to go to UC blank, that doesn't fly with a lot of our schools because, again, remember, all of the UCs that you apply to are getting the same exact application. So you want to make sure that you're answering in a way that can work for all of us. So keep that in mind. At the same time, you also want to make sure that you're understanding what's most important for you to share with us. You know, what is really crucial for you, for us to know when it comes to getting a better understanding of yourself, and you know what is crucial for us to know that would essentially have us see that you're going to be able to make a difference on our campuses. Here, of course, we have some do's and some don'ts, mostly some don'ts. First and foremost, don't text. Even though we're not focused on grammar, we still want to know exactly what you're writing. We might not always know what an acronym means, or and we're not essentially going to assume or guess what you're trying to write. So you want to make things clear for us. And we also don't want you to tell us what other people have said in the point of quotes. We want to hear what you're telling us about. We don't want quotes, is pretty much what I will say. It can take up space, and sometimes we won't even understand what it is that you're quoting. So don't include quotes, you know, make it easier on yourself. Also, with philosophy, we don't want you to tell us or try to ask us or pose to us very difficult questions like, what is life? You know, there's just not enough time in the application for us to discuss that. We want you to keep it simple and answer the questions that we're providing you, and not asking us questions like things like that. And also, when it comes to creative writing, keep in mind, as much as we'd like to read your creativity, we don't want you to tell us or read creative writing. We want you to tell us about how creative you are. Keep it, again, simple and straightforward. Get to the point about who you are. Remember, this is like a job interview almost. You wouldn't go into a job interview and read them a poem. You know, rather you want to make sure that you're telling us exactly who you are and what you've been able to do. Keep in mind that throughout the presentation, throughout these questions, you don't need to restate titles. We know exactly which ones you're going to answer, so you don't need to restate those at all. And again, keep in mind that we're not English teachers. We don't need extremely sophisticated wording. Keep it simple. Write to us as you would normally. And of course, there's no need to get into details about how the day was, or you know, if the sun was out or anything like that, with storytelling and scene setting. So make sure you're just getting straight to the point. And again, keep it professional, no slang, no abbreviations. You want to make sure that this is reading as you would talk during an interview, or in a way that we're going to be able to understand. I know that I might be seem a little bit younger, but even then, I might not understand some of the words that you might be telling us about in that section. So you want to keep it straightforward and professional. And the last thing with jokes, keep in mind that some humor is fine, but we don't want a comedian on our campus, right? We're not looking for comedians directly. We want you to definitely stay focused on the topic of what you're trying to share with us. And keep in mind that everyone has a different sense of humor. So some jokes might go over other people's heads, essentially. And of course, for the section, keep in mind, this kind of reiterates a lot of the things that we've talked about, but always make sure that you're tying everything that you're talking about back to yourself. Focus on yourself primarily. Using a lot of I and my statements really helps with that, because you're essentially saying, I did this, my experience has been that, I was able to accomplish this, rather than using us and we, which can get more complicated and also doesn't make it very clear what your specific experience has been. And of course, make sure that your examples that you are telling us are relevant to who you are today. Remember, keep that in mind as you're going through the application, because we want to get to know you, the person who you are today. Of course, when it comes to PIQs and COVID, we do want the students to know that you're not required to talk about COVID-19 or what your experience was during that part of your life. But if you do want to talk about it, keep a couple of different things in mind. For example, keep a couple of things in mind in the sense of, everybody's gone through this situation differently. Everybody, stay-at-home orders and different things that have happened because of COVID have looked differently for everybody. So you want to make sure that you're asking yourself a couple of questions as you look to talk about it, if you do want to. For example, how did your learning change? How did your home life change? How did your activities and involvement change, and how did you have to adjust? Again, make us understand what your specific experience has been, not necessarily try to generalize and think that we're going to assume what it was for you, because it was definitely different for everybody, and has been and will continue to be so until this gets resolved, pretty much. So the last section of the application to go over in this section, or to go over, is essentially the additional comment section. If you didn't get a chance to tell us something important about yourself throughout the presentation, this is essentially the place to do so. It's completely optional though, so you don't have to feel forced to do so. And also keep in mind this is not an additional area for more PIQs. We want you to stick to just the 4. If you put in a 5th PIQ in this section, keep in mind we're not going to read it. We will be able to figure it out very easily and we will skip right over it. If you have other information to tell us, definitely tell us in that section. However, we don't want more PIQs. And keep in mind that we did give you some examples here of what these include. However, these are all COVID related, but you definitely don't have to make the things that you talk about in the additional comment section COVID related. The one thing I will say that you should not include in this section are any external links. If you have links to YouTube videos, Instagram accounts, or anything like that, don't include them. We will not follow them, I promise you. Instead, tell us about those experiences and those activities and how they're meaningful to you. We do have some quick reminders for you here. So for example, when you create your UC application, be sure to use an email that essentially is going to be checked regularly. We will have a lot of information for you to go over, so make sure you're checking your email constantly. And also, one of the things that we will be emailing you about is setting up your campus portal, which you will need for every individual campus you apply to. So you want to make sure that you're keeping track of that as well. Here, of course, we have some dates and deadlines. So for you seniors, of course, August 1st of your senior year is when you can start working on your application. That is passed, so it is now October 14th. So for you seniors, no time like the present to get started. When it comes to November 1st to November 30th, that is essentially when you can start submitting your UC application. Keep in mind, however, that there's no early admissions decision or action, again, like I mentioned at the beginning. So turning in your application earlier does not increase your chances of getting in. Also keep in mind that mid-March is when you will find out if you are admitted, so keep an eye out then. And then the summer after graduation is when you'll need to turn in your official transcripts and test scores. So here we have some resources for all of you. Feel free to screenshot this, as this can be of a big help for everybody. You can find some resources here that are specific to our campus, as well as specifically towards the UC system and the UC application, which can be very, very beneficial to all of you. So feel free to screenshot that. So with that, essentially, we're going to essentially have the rest of the time for Q&A, but I do want to include here a couple of email addresses that you can use if you do have questions after the presentation. The UCSB for me at sa.ucsb.edu is a general one for our admissions office for general questions. If you'd like to ask questions directly to me, my email address is also on the screen. And you can definitely feel free to follow us on our different social media accounts. We've been very active during this virtual time to make sure that we're providing you with a lot of content there. So feel free to check us out both on Instagram and on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you, Guillermo. That was awesome. So we do have a few questions. I'll go ahead and read through them. So one being, do SAT and ACT scores make you a better candidate for colleges?
That's a great question. So when it comes to general colleges, it depends on the college. If we're talking the UC system, it can for certain UCs that decide to use it as part of the admissions process. However, it depends on the campus. What I will say is that generally, because we are test optional for folks for 2021 and fall 2022 across the UC system, if you're not able to take them, don't feel like you have to. They're optional. They're not required. So in that sense, if it doesn't make sense for you to take them because you can't or because it would take too much time or you can't afford it, don't feel like you have to. It doesn't reflect on you negatively, so you definitely don't have to take them if you don't want to.
Perfect. And we also have another question on if we want to double major, are we able to do it on the application or would it be later on?
It would definitely be later on. So double majoring and minoring is something that you pick up as you go along during your time at a university. It's not necessarily something that you have to tell us about right away on the application.
Great. So another question is, if my school offered Algebra 2 during summer as an advanced program, and it was affiliated with one of the community colleges, would it count as a college course or summer program?
Sure thing. So I would say that it depends on where it's going to show up. Whose transcript is it going to show up on? Do you need a college transcript for us to see that, or does it show up on your high school transcript? If it shows up on your high school transcript, you can just put it under your high school courses and that works perfectly fine. However, if you need to essentially send us your college transcript for it to show up, put it under the college section.
Perfect. And does making up a class grade during the summer affect our admission?
So that's an interesting question. So essentially, I'm guessing is, does my grade for a class I took in the summer matter? And it can. If it's for an A through G class, it will be used as part of the calculation of your GPA. So it can in that sense. Likewise, if you're using that as a way to satisfy an A through G requirement, you're also going to want to make sure that you get a C or better in that class. However, if it's not being used for an A through G class or not being used to, to complete an A through G at all, then it's not going to affect you.
Perfect, thank you. And what determines whether or not a college will take AP and IB tests and classes into account?
So I will say that all of the UCs take APs and IBs into account. If you pass the exams, you can get college credit. However, the classes will still be able to offer you that weighted GPA boost, regardless of what UC campus you're talking about.
Perfect. Awesome. And if you took an AP test and didn't do very well, does that look bad on your application?
Not at all. It looks like that's the next question as well here. Not at all. Essentially, when it comes to the UC application, nothing that you tell us will hurt you when it comes to the application process. Anything that you tell us can either be neutral or it will be positive. So in that sense, we recommend you to tell us everything because it can only be to your benefit in that sense.
Perfect. And if you participate in an activity on and off throughout your life, say doing a sport, then not doing it for a year or two, and then coming back to it, can or should we put that on our activities and awards?
If it's something that you've done during high school, definitely.
Awesome. And we know that the SAT and ACT are not being considered, but if students report them, what will they be used in consideration of?
Sure thing. So they can be used in consideration of adding more context. If a UC decides to use it, essentially it can give more information on the student, the academic rigor. If they did really well, that can earn some points in the sense of showing academic excellence or academic achievement. But it's just, you can essentially think of it as an additive. It's not something that is required or is not something that's going to boost a certain area. It just adds more value to the application, or it can if it is being used.
Perfect, thank you. And should you write about things that may be connected to your major, for example, summer programs that go into that major, or should we avoid mentioning our desired major altogether?
You can definitely talk about your major that you have in mind, definitely if you'd like. You don't have to talk about stuff related to your major directly if you don't want to. If it doesn't make sense towards what you want to talk about and what makes sense towards us getting a bigger picture about you, who you are and what you are, passionate about and been able to accomplish and been involved in. So if you did do a summer program and you want to tell us about it in the personal insight questions, then definitely tell us about it. But keep in mind, you're not required to specifically only talk about things that are related to your major.
Perfect, thank you. And we have another question on some don't have opportunities to go to other countries due to financial hardships. Will those that have the means to travel to other countries to be more competitive than those who do not? Can you elaborate more on how to travel to other countries will be considered?
So that counts as an experience. So just as a student can participate in a summer program in their local community college or local community center, that is exactly the same as an activity where a student can go to another country and have an experience like that in that sense. So essentially the way to think about these things is to essentially see it as an activity, something that I'm doing outside of what is required for me academically. So students who do travel outside of the country, are not more competitive than students who don't. Essentially, the idea is that, students will essentially have different activities depending on what their context is. I don't expect every student in the state of California to travel outside of the country to be competitive. All that we ask is that you tell us what your opportunities have been and what you've been able to do within the context of what you have available to you. And we will be able to essentially, score you based off of what your context is rather than, what a general context is for, the general student in California.
And can low SAT scores lower your placement in classes?
No, it will not lower your placement in classes.
Perfect. Does UCSB or any of the others have a place to submit a creative writing sample or portfolio submission for homeschooled students?
We do not. We do not have a specific place for that on the application. If we need it or require it, we will definitely ask you for it.
Perfect. Thank you. And is there an example of PIQs that you would see and automatically say no to?
Yeah, sure. I can give you an example. The example is a student who we wouldn't say no as in like, no, you're not admitted. It would just be like a don't do this kind of a moment. It would be to just write a poem or write us a song or, tell us a story that you just made up. That doesn't give us more context on yourself. Remember, the personal insight questions are like an interview. Think of the things that you wouldn't do in an interview and then don't do those things on the application is pretty much the way to think about it.
Thank you. And what are your thoughts on applying to all or many of the campuses?
I would say generally the key thing is to apply widely and as widely as you can. If you get few waivers, that helps you out because you get for free to be able to apply to wherever you want. And then if you want to spend some money to apply to other campuses, you definitely can. We definitely recommend applying to as many as you can, depending on where you want to go to as well. Like if there are some UC schools that you're just not willing to go to, then that's fine. We understand that. And you don't have to apply to them. But we do recommend applying widely because essentially this increases your chances of getting in somewhere within the UC system in the sense that if you apply to more places, you have more chances. So in that sense, if you can apply to more places, definitely apply to more places, but also be realistic for yourself. What places are you willing to go to? What schools actually have the majors that you want to go to? And what places, are going to be compatible with yourself.
Perfect, thank you. And then just due to time, I do want to announce really quick that the workshop code is UCSB. So make sure that you go onto our website and complete the survey. And then we do have today's winner for attending the workshop, which is Kevin Cruz. Kevin, are you still on here? If you are, okay, perfect. Congratulations. So you did win a gift card. We will be reaching out to you separately, so make sure you check your email. But congrats, so that's exciting. And then we do want to go into a few more questions, I know just because of the time frame. So let me go ahead and, there is a question on if the students should write about having a sibling in the Army.
Sure. So in that section, if it is something that is meaningful to you, that has brought, more context to who you are, definitely. Remember though, the application is about you and we want to learn about you. If you tell us and start focusing on other people, even if they are your siblings, we want to make sure that it's still giving us context on you. So, having a sibling in the Army or in the military is something that has been, stressful for you, traumatic for you. If it has brought any difficulties or if it has brought any positives and other experiences, tell us about your experience with it if you want to tell us about it. However, just simply saying my brother is in the military isn't going to give us much information about you. So you want to expand upon that and give us more information if you would like to tell us about it.
Perfect. And then we also have a question about dual enrollment. So our dual enrollment classes weighted the same as APs?
Correct. Yeah, if they are transferable college courses, they are weighted the same as APs.
Perfect. And does it look bad if we don't put a major we want to pursue if we are undecided?
So that depends on the campus, but typically the answer is no. Almost always the answer is no. For UCSB, the answer is definitely no. Undecided does not hurt your chance of getting in because we know that even as a senior in high school, sometimes you just don't know what you want to major in, which is perfectly fine. I mean, most students typically at the college level will switch their majors 2 or 3 times. So we can't expect even seniors to know exactly what they want to do for the next 4 years. So undeclared is a perfectly fine major to come in as.
Okay, and then one more question on what advice do you have for student athletes?
Sure thing. So I guess I'll answer it twofold. First, if you're a student athlete and you've been very active when it comes to a specific sport during your time in high school and even before that, tell us all about it. How long have you been playing that sport? What types of involvements have you been able to take on because of that sport? Also, how long have you been playing it? How much time does it take up on a weekly and on a monthly and a yearly basis for you? Because that's going to make us understand that if you've been focusing a lot on this sport, but you've been able to get really far, and you haven't been able to do other things because of that, if you tell us how long and how much time that takes up, we're going to be understanding about that and know that, okay, that's why they haven't done other things, and that's perfectly fine. Also, you want to make sure that you're telling us, how far you've gotten, how many competitions have you been a part of, what level, state, local, state, national, international, so that all of that stuff is clear. If you're looking to play for NCAA programs, reach out to the coaches. They are essentially the ones who decide who gets on the team and who doesn't. So you have to start with them to make sure that if you want to be a part of the team, that you're reaching out to them directly. And then from there, just apply to the UC application and go through that process as well.